Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show. Discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and today we're talking about books that make you learn about hidden heroes while also teaching children to read. It's a time in our country where division is just plaguing us. And in that realm, we have New York Times bestselling author Mark K Shriver offering parents and teachers a handbook that teaches gratitude, unity, and healing. This is his first children's book, and it's called 10 Hidden Heroes, a counting book with a message. Mark K. Shriver is the president of the Save the Children Action Network in Washington, D.C. He created the Choice Program and is a former Maryland state legislator. He is also the author of two other books, Pilgrimage, My Search for the Real Pope Francis, and the New York Times bestselling memoir, A Good Man, Rediscovering My Father, Sargent Shriver, which received a 2013 Christopher Award. Mark, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you, and you made me sound kind of almost like I've done some things in my life. So thank you for the nice introduction.
You've done a few things. Yes, you've done a couple of things there. So let's start first with 10 Hidden Heroes. This is an amazing children's book that has this dual meaning, right? Yes, it's a numbers book. It's teaching children how to count, but it's also spotlighting the importance of helping others. Why did you write this book?
I thank you for the nice words about 10 Hidden Heroes. Really, I think, we've heard so much at the beginning of COVID about essential heroes, essential workers. And I wanted to really look at that issue to see what makes people real heroes. And too often in America, in our culture, we've spent so much time talking about celebrity or power or money or fame. And I don't think that's really what's important in life. And I thought this would be a fun way to try to lift up those folks who are real heroes, or at least heroes in my estimation, and do it in a fun way. So it's a little bit like that book. You remember Where's Waldo? And you try to find Waldo and there's 1,000 characters on a page. But in this case, you're trying to find the heroes doing good things in their communities. And you have to, there's 10 on page 10, there's 9 on page 9, 8 on page 8, and so forth. So it's a counting game. It's a hide and seek game. And hopefully kids of all ages, readers of all ages, will ask questions about why certain people are depicted as heroes. I've heard from a number of uncles and aunts and grandparents, and obviously mothers and fathers, that have been asked questions by their little readers about why is that guy who is, composting his dinner a hero? Why is that person who's picking up trash a hero? Why is the Special Olympics athlete a hero? So in that regard, it's been a fun process with writing the book with my wife, Jeannie, and our 3 kids to try to figure out what's really important to us. And I hope it will spark some fun conversations. It's not a preachy book, Desiree. It's supposed to be fun, but a book that also has a little bit of a meaning to it as well.
I like the fact that you have heroes that, and maybe that's why they're called hidden heroes, right? This isn't about Superman and Wonder Woman. This is about people who are real people. And you teach about caring for animals, the environment, and just caring for other people. And it sounds like that was very intentional. You wanted to shine a spotlight on sometimes the ordinary, everyday hero, right?
Yes, and you mentioned, Desiree, that I wrote a book on Pope Francis a number of years ago. And, he had a quote about 6 months ago about the hidden saints who live next door to you, who commit daily acts of love. And that's exactly what I was trying to talk about. Again, this is not a Catholic book or a Christian book or a preachy book, but it's about the hidden saints who live next door. It's about the person who maybe works on the crosswalk, who makes sure that your kids get to school safely. It's about the folks in the neighborhood, the older brother who's helping the little sister after she skins her knee. It's these small acts of love that, as Pope Francis said, these small acts of love that can change the history of the world. And that may seem like a pretty grandiose statement, and it is, but I really do believe these small little gestures add up. My uncle, Senator Bobby Kennedy, had a great quote when he was in South Africa in 1968 about tiny ripples of hope that can knock down the mightiest walls of oppression and segregation and anger and hatred. I'm butchering his quote, but the point is that these little ripples of hope, I think, are all around us, and we don't celebrate them enough. We don't lift up the people who are not only nurses and doctors in our hospitals, but the custodians in our hospitals who keep the hospital clean and sanitized. About the teachers and the folks who work in our schools, but there are all sorts of different gestures that make a big difference. So that's what the conversation's about. There's a young girl in there, Desiree, who is blind, who's teaching her friend how to read Braille. And I know a friend of mine told me that his daughter said, well, why, if she's blind, is she a hero? And he said, well, because regardless of what skills you have, you can make a big difference in any number of ways. If you're blind, you can teach somebody to read Braille. If you are a handicapped, there's a kid in there who's in a wheelchair who participates in a race for the homeless. So we all have different skills, and we all can be leaders in different ways and heroes in different ways. And that's what the book 10 Hidden Heroes is about.
And that is such an incredible message. You touched on it earlier too. And maybe it's because in this digital era, in an era where we've been, pretty much social distancing for a year and are just starting to come out of that, and in a world too where we see politicians, celebrities, people who become Insta famous doing virtually nothing to have a platform. And then, on the flip side, it's like, no, you can make a difference in this world if you help people. And I think that's such a poignant message to get across to kids.
Thank you. I hope you're right. I think you're right. And that's the message of the book, Insta famous. I haven't heard that term, but that's a good one. I might use that later. And it is, some people are famous for being famous, because they, inherited a lot of money, or they did something ridiculous on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And I think those folks, those kind of that our culture looks to, are fading and will fade over, in many cases, very quickly. And that's not what I think makes America so strong and powerful, and what makes humanity move in the right direction. What makes humanity move in the right direction are these small gestures of love. I mean, they can be big gestures of love, right? I mean, you could run a nonprofit or a business that does good for the community and that hires hundreds of people. Those are all important things. But what I'm afraid we celebrate too often, Desiree, as I mentioned, is power, celebrity, the Super Bowl winning quarterback, the CEO who has a lot of money and cars and airplanes, and the celebrity who's done nothing really in many cases other than be a celebrity. That's not what I think is important. It's about making a commitment to our community. It's about making a commitment to your family, to your neighborhood, and helping them out, to your state. And that's what the book 10 Hidden Heroes is trying to celebrate, to lift those little gestures up, and to celebrate those folks, and to have kids have a good time. Again, I've said it once, maybe twice, this is not a preachy book. It's supposed to be fun. And it's supposed to, make us all question, not just little kids, not 3 to 5 to 6-year-old kids that are reading it or it being read to them, but are, readers of all ages. Do you really think that it's important to celebrate a Special Olympics athlete who is from Israel, who's arm in arm with an athlete from the United Arab Emirates? I was at the Special Olympic Games in Abu Dhabi, a year or so ago, over a year ago. And, the athletes from Special Olympics, Israel got a standing ovation. At that point in time, the United Arab Emirates, the country, didn't even recognize Israel. But here were athletes showing us all that what's more important than political disagreement is to be friendly, is to put your arm around each other, is to compete with, goodness in your heart. You want to win, great. But you can also show that if you're from Israel or from the UAE, you can get along. That's a couple of months after those games, the United Arab Emirates as a country recognized Israel. Do we think that those Special Olympics athletes are heroes? Do we think a kid who's in a wheelchair participates in a run for the homeless can be a hero, or somebody who raises money for the homeless or for food banks? Those are the heroes that I think we should be celebrating and talking to our kids about.
Yeah, you raise several things that I want to dig into with you. I do want to talk to you about the Save the Children Network and what you're doing there. But first, I'm going to circle back to this idea. I mean, your family, let's face it, your family has had a spotlight shined on it in many ways for many years. And you come from a family that gives service. So do you feel that within you as a writer, as somebody who's written not just this book, but the other books that we mentioned too, do you feel that it's just something that's been instilled within you because of your family that you're giving back now?
I think, look, my mom and dad, I was talking to a friend of mine actually over breakfast today about what constitutes work. And I think my mom and dad, as corny as it sounds, never went to work because they thought every day was a chance to make the world a little bit better. So I don't think they considered going to the office work because it was a chance to, do, as I said, make the world a little bit better. They were Catholics. They, went to mass every day. They realized they weren't God, that they needed help, that we were all in this together, and that we needed to support each other. And I think that's what fired them up and got them excited about going, to work every day because it wasn't work. And when you see that as a kid, I mean, I just think I got that sense from, I don't remember my mother or father ever, calling in for a sick day because I think they felt, wow, get a chance to go to the office, see if I can make the world a little bit better today. Maybe I can help in, just the office. Maybe I can spread Special Olympics around the world, which my mother founded, or, expand the scope of the Peace Corps, which my dad started, or Head Start, which he also created, legal services for the poor. So I just think that to be around two people that really loved doing what they were doing, and it was, interacting with others, it was lifting up the voice of the voiceless, raising the visibility of the good works of people with developmental disabilities or the work of people all around the world, benefiting from Special Olympics or from Head Start or from the Peace Corps, were just two great role models. They never said to me, Desiree, look, you got to go and work in a nonprofit, or they never said that to my siblings. They told us we, got to get out of bed and go to work, hustle, in the best sense of the word. But it was never you had to go work in community service or, do that. It just, I think, was something that you just felt seeing them do it every day.
Yeah. Yeah. You did it because you felt it and you knew that there was something beautiful and right within doing that. And I applaud you for that. So tell us a little bit. Can we talk about the Save the Children Action Network and how you founded that and what it's doing for people all around the world?
Sure. Save the Children Action Network is the political advocacy arm for Save the Children. And Save the Children, is a 100-year-old nonprofit. It was actually started in England over 100 years ago, came to America around the Depression, was actually feeding kids impacted by the Depression in Kentucky. It was the precursor of the federal lunch program. I ran all of our work here in the United States until about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I started about 7 years ago, an advocacy group that will enable us to participate in elections, to try to put pressure on our elected officials, not only on a state, but also federal level and a local level, actually here in America, to invest in children. So often we hear politicians say kids are our most important resource. But if you think about it, kids get shortchanged, especially children who are poor, because they don't give campaign contributions. They don't vote in high numbers. So what we were trying to create with Save the Children Action Network is a group of people. There's about 350,000 now who are writing letters to the editor, who are sending emails, making phone calls, showing up at town hall meetings when you could do that, or the state fair, to impress upon elected officials that they should invest in our children. Not only here in America, but invest in kids all around the world. So we're not as strong as, other political organizations now, that are advocating for everything from the environment to guns to, Israel to, the right to reproductive health. I mean, these are all very powerful organizations, whether you agree with them or not. We wanted to create something through Save the Children Action Network that was going to be doing that work on behalf of children, not only here in America, but around the world. So it's a lot of fun. It started, we're still in a startup phase, but we're making a difference in a number of states and in Washington, D.C. as well, trying to get our elected officials to prioritize children.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and you just I can't underscore that enough. The children really are our future, as cliche as that sounds. And I think it was
Yes,
an old song as well. But the thing is too is I could probably get into politics with you very easily, but I'm not going to do that because I think the message here is it doesn't matter which political side you're on. At the
absolutely. And that's 100% correct. I'm just going to cut you off. I should have said it and I didn't, that we're bipartisan. So we work with Republicans and Democrats. We support Republicans and Democrats and independents who are, pushing an agenda for children on. Because it's right, children are our most important resource, or they're our future. Those are cliches. And for too long, a number of political leaders, say that and then they didn't invest. And that's because, squeaky wheel, unfortunately, in a democracy gets greased. And, in America, we just haven't had children's voices being raised to the forefront. So we work with Republicans and Democrats and independents if you're pushing an agenda for kids. So it's not political in that regard, but it's, hey, this is important. It's not a nice to have, we got to have it because kids are our future. And kids are, if they struggle in early years, they're going to struggle in high school. They're going to struggle. And it's an economic issue in this country. It's a social justice issue. It's a scientific issue where you can see brain growth happening when you invest early. And that's what we want to do, is invest in our youngest children, because it's the best investment as a country we can make.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any thoughts? I talk to educators, I talk to teachers, especially during COVID, especially since we've been teaching our kids in some kind of online hybrid environment. There's so many stories we're hearing about kids falling behind. What do you see the impact about at this point in history on the cognitive abilities of our children?
There's so many kids living in poverty, Desiree, before COVID hit. I mean, let me just give you this statistic. If you live in poverty in America, by the age of 4, you are 18 months behind a kid who doesn't live in poverty. So by the age of 4, you're 18 months behind. So when our kids, to speak for my wife, Jean, and I, when our kids were going into kindergarten or pre-K, they were so far ahead of children who live in poverty. And we spend billions of dollars trying to remediate those kids to get up to grade level so that they'll excel in elementary grades and do well in high school, and maybe go get an AA or an undergraduate or a master's degree, or to go into a technical school and they can become a plumber, an electrician, whatever they want to be, a doctor, a lawyer. But those kids are so far behind. And as a country, we've invested so little resources in those first 3 or 4 years of life. Other countries have. China, India, Europe. They're investing in those critical first 5 years of life. So I think, look, kids that are poor are even further behind as a result of COVID. We're going to have to get those kids up to grade level. They were behind before COVID. And I think we've seen some of these inequities exposed. And I hope it really does force all of us to say, are we investing in our children? And the answer is no. Are we investing in childcare? Which is, one childcare worker said to me the other day, I think you'll love this quote, is, I'm not a childcare worker. I'm a brain architect. And when 90% of brain growth happens in the first 5 years of life, 90% of brain growth happens in the first 5 years of life. Yet as a country, we almost don't invest until a child is 5 years of age. Anybody who's a businessman or a businesswoman knows that that's a huge lost opportunity. So we need to invest in those first 5 years of life. We need to treat people who work in child care not as a child care worker, but as brain architects, and they need to be compensated accordingly, and they need to be invested in. And we need to do that as a country. It's a lot of work. But if we don't, we're going to continue to lose millions of children and lose the skills that they could bring to the table, and it's going to hurt our country.
Yeah, I love that. You're right. Brain architect.
Isn't that a great line?
That nails it. That nails it.
Nails it. She said, when I was a kindergarten and first grade teacher, everybody called me a teacher. Then when I went to teach the littlest kids, they called me a child care worker. She said, I was just treated differently as a teacher versus a worker. And she said to me, look, Mark, I'm not a worker. I'm a brain architect. And I'm like, I'm stealing that line because that is a good line. Because she really is. And a lot of folks don't know that 90% of brain growth happens in those first 5 years of life. But as a country, we just choose to ignore it. One politician told me, that's snacks and a nap, and you got to clean off their runny nose. And that's completely inaccurate. The brain's firing. They're picking up what the parent is reading to them, or the nursery rhymes, or, that little square thing in a square hole and a round one in a round hole that you play with your kids or your nephews and your nieces. That's teaching them fine motor skills. All the words they're hearing is having their brain grow. And kids that are living in poverty don't get those experiences. They don't have those games. They don't have those role models. They don't have those books in the home. And that's why they're so far behind by, 4 years of age. And we can change it, though. That's what's exciting.
Yeah. Well, and, you hinted at it. Part of it is changing the perception of the adults who are making these decisions. Because if they don't understand how important that brain growth is in those early stages, then they're not going to funnel money and advocate for those programs and those people, et cetera.
That's exactly right.
I think it's important, too, to realize when we talk about brain growth, it's more than even just learning things. When a child is hungry, when they go to school and they haven't had breakfast, it's harder for them to even learn because they physically don't have the energy. And if a child is living in fear because they sense that mom and dad might not be working, or somebody's job's at stake, or there's, some kind of, domestic situation going on, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
That's correct.
How can that child concentrate on reading when they're worried about where their next meal is coming from, or they're worried about their safety?
You're 1,000% correct, Desiree. And a lot of kids are suffering through parental unemployment, or a drug issue in the house, or a divorce, or any number being in any number of different risk factors. And yet we know that if we invest early and we make sure that those kids are stimulated cognitively, stimulated socially and emotionally, and that they're fed and that they have health care, that those kids can pursue whatever their dreams are, whether they want to be a lawyer or a doctor, or they want to be a car mechanic, or stay at home with their kids. These are all different callings that are very powerful in our community, and we need folks with all of these different skill sets. But we just don't want to invest in those kids. And I think that's, one guy said it's benign neglect. And it is benign neglect, but it's time that it's no longer neglect. And that's what Save the Children Action Network is. And that's what we hope people will get in the arena with us and push that issue, and push for food and for healthcare for our youngest kids and for our families. Because that will lift that'll lift America. And you'll see it across economic analysis from Dr. James Heckman at the University of Chicago. Is a Nobel Prize winner. And, he's not a flaming liberal. University of Chicago is not a flaming liberal organization. You see it from, and he says this is the best investment in high quality early education, is the best investment we can make as a country. You see it in brain scans that come out of the University of Washington, where you can actually see the size of a child's brain grow when that child is stimulated cognitively and socially and emotionally. So we know what works. We just don't have the political courage, the political gumption to actually invest in kids. We got to plant those seeds. And that's what we do at Save the Children. And that's what we try to do at Save the Children Action Network too.
Yeah. I love it. Again, everything that you're saying is so spot on. And I love educating our children. I'm going to segue though, because I'm really interested in the variety of books that you've written. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey as a writer, as an author, because you've written the book, The Pilgrimage, My Search for the Real Pope Francis, which in itself was an amazing book. Then you wrote a memoir about your father, A Good Man, Rediscovering My Father, Sargent Shriver, and now a children's book. Can you talk a little bit about your author's journey and how it felt going from one book to the next?
Well, thank you for asking the question. The first book I wrote was on my dad, and it was after he died. And, a number of people said to me, your father was a good man. And, when he died, he was on the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post and on the nightly news as all of these so-called great things that he did, whether it was creating the Peace Corps, whether for President Kennedy, whether running the war on poverty for President Johnson. He ran for vice president of the United States. He was an ambassador to France. He worked with my mom with Special Olympics, spreading it all around the world. But what touched me were the comments of people, the waitress at his favorite restaurant who waited in line at the wake and just said, your father was a good man. He was always so polite to me when he came into the restaurant. The guy at the U.S. Air counter, now the American Airlines counter at National Airport, he told me that, he waited in line at the wake as well. Your father was a good man, even though he was battling Alzheimer's. He was always so polite when I took him through security, and he was always so gracious to me. And I wanted to really figure out what the difference was between goodness and greatness, because I think there's a lot of so-called great people that aren't good, when the cameras aren't on them, that don't treat the guy at the airline counter or the cab driver or the waitress or waiter or custodian the same the way they treat a big shot or somebody who's going to make them money, or somebody who's going to get them on television. Yeah. So that was what the book was about. My father had a unique ability to treat those folks that were not, big shots or going to help his career the same as he treated the big shots. And that's what I heard. That's goodness. And, so that was, to try to go back. He wrote me letters almost every day, from high school right on until Alzheimer's robbed him of the ability to write. Some of them were to my sibs and to me as a group letter. Some were, most of them were individual notes to try to distill what made this guy tick, what made him so good, so that I could learn to try to be a little bit better father, a little bit better husband, a better friend, to be good. So that's what that book is about. It's to try to distill those. And it's the same, what makes Pope Francis, different. I was educated by the Jesuits, which is a group of Catholic educators, priests, that I think are the best educators in the world. He is a Jesuit. So the book is a journey to try to figure out what makes that guy tick, why he is frankly different, I think, than any Pope in my lifetime, clearly. Why did he says the things he does. And he got a lot of characteristics of treating, again, the big shots the same as he treats, the not so important people. And that's what, 10 Hidden Heroes is about, right? It's around, do we really consider, the governor of the state or a cardinal or a rabbi or a rich business person? Do we treat them the same as we treat, the custodian at our, building, the people who clean up our offices when we leave at night, or the janitor, the custodians at our kids' schools? We treat them the same as we treat the president of the school. So I like, I guess I'm more interested as I move through life about the people that aren't, considered big shots. Air quotes for those on the radio that can't hear it. I think that those are the people that are really admirable. And my father, and really Pope Francis and a couple of other folks I've written on, and the people in 10 Hidden Heroes, this book I wrote, those are the people that I admire the most. The people that treat everyone the same, treat them like you really believe that they're a human being. I mean, it sounds corny, but it's true.
Yeah.
The Jesuits they were started by a guy named Ignatius of Loyola, and he believed that God was in all things, that God's in this conversation, and God is in your home. It's God's outside in nature. And I think my father really understood that God was in every relationship and was in every person. And you had to, and my mother did as well, profoundly important. My mother did as well. And how do you, interact with that person and treat that person like they are God-like? And if you really believe that, wow, I mean, it just changes everything, every interaction you look at, right? And I think that's what I'm trying to figure out. But let me just say one last thing, Desiree. My book is called A Good Man, Rediscovering My Father, Sargent Shriver, right? And after the book was written, our daughter was at 16 at that point, and she said, "Dad, I'm going to write a book about you. When you get older and I get older." And I said, "Oh, honey, that's so sweet. What are you going to call it?" And she said, "An okay dad." So okay. Look, I'm trying. I'm not at my father's level or Pope Francis or even the people that are in my 10 Hidden Heroes. I'm trying, but I'm an okay dad. So that's what life is about, right? It's the journey, and you try to get a little bit better every day. And I think if you asked her now, a couple years later, she'd still say I'm, in the okay category.
The okay plus dad. You're leveling up every couple of years or so.
I don't know. You're being generous. I don't know if she'd agree with you, but thank you.
Well, I love how your writing has a through line. You're right. How, your beginning writing about your dad and Pope Francis has that theme to it. And that's what is instilled in 10 Hidden Heroes, which is your current book. Can you give us a glimpse what's going on with you in the future? Are we going to see you in politics or more going on with your organization, more books? What's going on?
I don't know. My wife is a very organized genie. We've been married almost 30 years, and she keeps saying, what's the plan for the next 2 or 3 years? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, the book on my father came about after I gave a eulogy when he died. And a couple of people said, you should write up his story. Because I'm like, what do I do now that my dad died? My mother had died, whatever, 14 months earlier. It's like, what do I do now? And then somebody said, write the book and write the stories of what he taught you. And that was that book. And then somebody read that book and, called me up and said, will you write one on Pope Francis? And I said, okay. I mean, I don't speak Spanish. I'd never been to Argentina. But I, was raised Catholic, educated by the Jesuits. So that popped up. And then somebody, the folks at Loyola Press who published 10 Hidden Heroes said, hey, I guess what you call it, there's a through line through your books here. Why don't you, would you be interested in writing a children's book? And I'm like, okay. So I kind of, and I wrote a, chapter of another book called 9 Irish Lives, which is on 9 Irish immigrants to America. I wrote on Father Flanagan, the guy who started Boys Town. It's an amazing story. And there's, 8 other Irish immigrants who came to America. So I don't know what's going to come next. If you have ideas or any of your listeners, viewers have any good ideas, send me an email. I'm always open for ideas. So I don't really have a game plan. I think trying to write and understand goodness better, which I think is a really big issue, not only for all of us, but for, men in particular, because I think there's a huge emphasis on this. I don't know if toxic masculinity is the right thing, but I think, my father kneeling every day, my mother kneeling every day and realizing they weren't, the end all and the be all, that they weren't God, is a pretty powerful example. And how do we teach our particularly our young boys that, they can be thoughtful and empathetic and caring, and that they can be emotional and they can talk about how they're feeling when that didn't really happen a whole lot, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of groping around with those issues too.
Oh, that's a great topic. Yeah, there's actually, I'll tease a little bit. There's an author we're going to be talking to, I think in July, who's written a book about that exact topic, about men and them finding their place and, kind of unraveling and getting rid of that stereotype of that male toxicity that can sometimes crop up. It's a
good one.
Topic.
That sounds like a great interview. Probably more interesting than me because that's a good one. But I think it's kind of what I'm trying to write about here through the examples I've had in my life. I've been blessed with.
Yeah, this has been a great interview, Mark. I have had such a good time talking to you and learning more about you and your books and your writing and your stories, because that's what it's all about, is our stories, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. And, I just gone to the stories of, growing up with my dad, stories of, some Pope Francis that I got from people that are friends with him in Argentina and a little bit in Italy. And the stories of the people that I think are our real heroes in our midst, which is what 10 Hidden Heroes is about. Yeah. Those folks that are doing the small but really important things. And we need to be celebrating them and raising them up, I hope.
And the story that one day your daughter is going to write about you, and then I'll have her as a guest on this show. How's that?
Something to look forward to. That would be that crowning achievement to have my daughter on, be interviewed and say something nice about me.
All right. We'll see if we can make it happen.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
Mark, can you give everybody your information? Where can they find out more about you, your books, as well as about the Save the Children Action Network?
Save the Children Action Network's on the web. Save the Children is on the web as well. They're 2 different organizations, sister organizations. We need help on, the political advocacy front, again, bipartisan. I'd love it if folks go and sign up, learn more about it. 10 Hidden Heroes is, for sale everywhere from Walmart.com to Amazon to your local independent store. Barnes and Noble, it's all out there. There's also a website, 10hiddenheroes.com, which is a bunch of ideas that teachers can use to talk about the book, games associated with what real heroes do. A lot of fun ideas there on 10hiddenheroes.com that teachers can use in order to stimulate conversation in their classroom with little kids, right on through 3rd and 4th grade, to talk about what's really important in life. So it's all out there. I'm on the web. I'd love to hear from folks.
Oh, I love it. Again, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. Go ahead and hold up that book cover so everybody can see it.
Yeah, Desiree asked me to get it and we forgot to bring it out here. It's a nice book, right?
It's beautiful. I love the illustrations.
Yeah, and the last one, because and each of the 10, 9, 8, they're 4 sentences, right? They're rhyming little rhymes. The last one, I won't blow the story, but the last one I think is the best one. And it's a couple of parents have told me that's their favorite part about it. It's asking the kids what kind of hero they're going to be. And they get a little certificate at the end of the book, and they can stick it on their wall and remind them every day that we can all do something to make the world and our families a little bit more peaceful, a little bit more just, and a little bit moving in the right direction.
Mark K Shriver, you are a hero, and I thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today as well. You can find out more about us on our website, booksthatmakeyou.com, as well as we're on Instagram and Facebook, and of course on YouTube. Please do subscribe to our channel. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.